Hi, this is Anyday with TGN, and this is my comprehensive DPS Sage guide for PvP. Playing a Sage in PvP can be a lot of fun, but there are a lot of small caveats that people should be aware of. One of them being that while pushing out tons of DPS is fun, having more utility is key in winning against high caliber players because of the objective-based nature of PvP in Star Wars. In this video, I'm going to talk about what I feel to be the best talent specialization, and what the best tactics are in the current warzone rotation. I'm also going to talk a little bit about gearing and how the recent Surge nerf affects you. The very first thing to consider when choosing your talents is that if you're facing off against coordinated opponents, they will almost always mark you as a priority target. So having the utility to survive most melee attacks is key because fighting melee opponents is where you will be your weakest. With that considered, I favor a heavy telekinetic hybrid build so that I get a lot of DPS while also retaining a large amount of utility. Let's go over some important talents in the telekinetic tree that I feel are important to this spec. Telekinetic defense is good for absorbing a decent amount of damage. And because the major issue with Sages is survivability, this talent is invaluable for any spec. Force Wake turns your Force Wave into a 2-second root, and it is extremely useful for getting melee away from you, but it is also useful for holding off a cap point in Voidstar or Alderaan when trying to cap these nodes. Kinetic Collapse turns your Force Armor into a 2-second stun to all enemies within 5 yards, and does not give much resolve when it is either removed or it dissipates. This makes it extremely useful to stun enemies and fire on Hotball or to use it to gain an advantage. Psychic Projection gives a new proc that essentially doubles our alacrity while casting Telekinetic Throw. As it will be explained later, we depend on Telekinetic Throw for our proc on Telekinetic Wave, so you can imagine the kind of DPS rotation that is starting to form here with this talent. Telekinetic Wave is one of our biggest burst spells, as well as one of our heaviest hitting AoE spells. If you're ever fighting multiple targets, you always want to cast this spell with Telekinetic Throw procs. Force Suppression is an important talent to pick up because we are constantly using Weaken Mind to get alacrity procs on our Telekinetic Throw. This talent increases the amount of damage our Weakened Mind does by 20% whenever we cast Force Imbalance. Force Imbalance coupled with Telekinetic Wave is a deadly combination of high DPS AoE spells. Presence of Mind is the talent that binds this build together. It's a proc that goes off while casting Telekinetic Throw, which makes your next damaging ability an instant cast. This is typically used on Telekinetic Wave, but in single target or one-on-one situations, it should be used on Mind Crush. Having a synergy between your stat point allocation and your talents is key to maintaining a high DPS output. So now that I've covered the most important talents of this spec, I'm going to talk a little bit about gearing. Let me first talk about diminishing returns on secondary stat points and why you need to consider how to allocate your gear in terms of stats. Diminishing returns essentially means that for every stat point of a particular stat, each stat point thereafter is less effective. Diminishing returns exponentially taxes you the higher you go, so you need to consider at some point whether or not you're stacking too much of a particular stat point. In the past, it was good to stack surge rating as high as you could, but due to the recent patch, once you reach around 150 to 200 surge rating, you should stop and start going alacrity. I also try to stop gearing expertise after around 550 rating to gain more primary stats such as endurance and willpower. To achieve this balancing act in Battlemaster gear, I use both my Ricotta belt and bracers with the level 50 craftable relic, because the primary stats they give outweigh the expertise after high diminishing returns after 550 rating. With Surge rating, I've replaced all my adept enhancements with Volition, because you can easily obtain around 200 Surge rating without modding for it. Here's a general idea of what my gear looks like. If you're interested in what my set choices are or where to obtain mods and enhancements, please visit my personal channel at youtube.com/AnydayTV. General rotation and strategy for a Sage is pretty straightforward. Try not to engage in melee combat. Try to always take the high ground. Use your roots, slows, stuns, and knockbacks to stay alive. In Alderaan, position yourself in high locations. The only real threat to you as a DPS Sage in a ranged PvP battle is a sniper or gunslinger. So if you see one targeting you, try to line of sight them. For your DPS rotation, you will want to open up with Force and Balance, followed by Weaken Mind on up to 3 targets. Then start casting Telekinetic Throw until you proc your instant cast Telekinetic Wave. You want to rinse and repeat until all targets are dead. When it comes to Hutball, always make sure you have the height advantage, and use your pull ability to advance the ball. When your team is not running the ball, or when you're not running the ball yourself, try to control the center. Thank you for watching my Sage DPS PvP guide. I think I've covered pretty much everything there is to say. Please like and subscribe, and feel free to visit my personal channel if you have any questions or comments. Thank you.
This video is part of the Way movement, a career path in video sponsored by TGN. To learn more, visit tgn.tv.